This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
Welcome to the World Awakenings podcast. But before we start, I'd like to tell you about my very special ebook I wrote called The 3 Pillars, a simple 3-step process to manifest positive and permanent change in your life. This concise 32-page 3-pillar ebook will teach you how to become a successful and consistent co-creator of your life path with the law of attraction. Yes, you can manifest the life you truly desire. And this ebook is absolutely free. Simply scan the QR code you now see on the screen or click on the link you see below in the show notes and get your free download today. The 3 Pillars ebook, written by me, Carl Gruber, will positively change your life. Download your copy today. Yes, and welcome. It's time once again for you to join me on our exploration of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, right here on World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment. This is episode number 190, and I am your host, Carl Gruber. And today we are blessed with our guest, Yosi Amram. Yosi is a licensed clinical psychologist, a CEO leadership coach, an author, and a pioneering researcher in the field of spiritual intelligence. His education consists of earning his master's degree from MIT, his MBA from Harvard, and a PhD in clinical transpersonal psychology. He's the author of the book, Spiritually Intelligent Leadership, How to Inspire by Being Inspired. That is an awesome book. And that book has proven to be the pinnacle of research and writing on the topic and has been cited in over 1,000 research papers on the topic. And we are blessed to have you here, Yosi. Thank you for being on World Awakenings.
Thank you, Carl. I'm honored and delighted to be here with you. And thanks for the kind introduction.
Well, and I always have to, and I want to. I do research on my guests, and whoa, your history is pretty interesting. How does a young man who was drafted at the age of 18 in the Israeli military in a war-torn area of the world divert himself to reach the pinnacles of education and corporate success and go on to becoming a leading expert in this field of spiritual intelligence? That sounds like quite a ride.
Yeah, how many hours do we have for me to tell my life story?
We'll figure.
Okay. All right. So I'll try and briefly explain my journey and my story. But in a sense, when I look back, we kind of live life forward. We make sense of it looking back. And if I look back, like everything in my life lines up to bring me to this moment and this work I'm doing. But just to kind of put some context on that. So indeed, at age 18, despite my pacifistic leanings, I was drafted into the military in Israel. I was kind of a math and science nerd, a shy, introverted kid. And so military was not exactly my cup of tea. Luckily, it was a peaceful time in the region, so I didn't have to confront battle. But to my surprise, I had the fastest promotion record in the history of my regiment, won all these leadership awards and so on. But despite excelling in that environment, the military command and control model kind of chafed at my soul. And while it's an effective model and necessary in battle, you don't have time to take people into a conference room and reach consensus and whiteboard things. Someone has to take charge, etc. But, it doesn't necessarily inspire the greatest creativity and human potential. So that chafed at my soul, and I resolved to someday to hope to build an organization based on more humanistic principles that inspire the best in people. And that kind of led me to a life dream at that age, which would be to start to be an entrepreneur and someday start a company and build an organization based on these more humanistic principles. So that's why I came to the US. At the time, there wasn't a infrastructure like there is today for startups in Israel. And I got education at MIT. I thought my path would be through engineering and discovery because that was kind of where I came from. But I quickly discovered that even though I was a decent engineer and so on, I enjoyed more the people interaction. So I switched to business, and ultimately, I started a company. My first company was called Individual Inc. And Individual was the first company to do personalized interactive newspapers. So, Carl, we'd take your profile, and this is before the internet. This is in the late 80s, early 90s. You'd get on your fax machine, if you can remember that technology,
Yeah.
a morning newspaper that was Carl's Daily News, and it had all the stories and interest and people that you were interested in tracking. And we had self-learning, software that would take your feedback of what was relevant or not and adjust and so on. So that was the idea. The name Individual was personalizing the news to the unique needs of each individual. But the other side of it was an organizational philosophy that supported the growth of each individual in a community, in a team context. So this was kind of a very passionate part of what I was about and had been my lifelong dream. And I was working 70, 80 hours a week, kind of as a driven tech entrepreneur. And then the internet came, and it was clear that it was going to upend our business model, which was driven on subscription. So I became kind of paralyzed by fear. I was overworked. I burned out. Now, you could say it was a dark night of the soul. You could say it was a clinical depression. It could be both. But anyway, I persisted and persevered and changed our business model from fax to an internet and so on. And we became a highly successful public company and a rising stock price. And it was crazy times, the early part of the internet. This is 95, 96. And it was very exciting. And I had all these initiatives, and I was running around, still working like mad with a stock price that was rising and excitement of all these possibilities. And one day I was trying to relax and to de-stress, and I was getting a massage and a deep tissue massage. And before I knew it, as I was relaxing, our egoic structure is often also held in our body. And as we relax our body, we can relax those egoic structure. And before I knew it, my sense of self dissolved, and I experienced the interconnectedness of everything. And I was looking through the face cradle and the massage table, and looked like the floor was inside me. There was no separation. Everything was one. And as they say, and but that kind of blew up my mind, blew the circuits, and it actually threw me into a manic episode because I just couldn't contain that energy, or that Kundalini awakening, if you want to talk about it in those languages. And I was the CEO of a public company, and I had all these ideas of where the internet was going, and it was going to be the network of networks, connects everything across time and space. And I wanted all my company the leader in that. And so I was driving everybody really hard. I wasn't very grounded in that kind of euphoric, manic state. And so the net of it was that the board pushed me out and put me on a quote unquote voluntary leave of absence, which there was nothing voluntary about it. But it was a big trauma because the company was my baby. And there were headline stories in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal about how I was emotionally unstable, which was fair. But, I was kind of excommunicated from the high echelon and the venture capital and the startup and all the people who sought my company and my advice and so on. All of a sudden, I became canceled, to use today's terminology, and people weren't returning my emails and so on. So there was a lot of shame.
But honestly, I mean, just to review, there was a lot. I mean, your younger life was go, 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 and I mean, from from being an 18-year-old in the Israeli military to going to MIT, you must have been a heck of a student to get accepted in MIT in the first place. I mean, that's quite the amazing institution. But then you morphed into being a CEO of this industry. It's interesting. You say you were a tech expert there, but I mean, really, there were computers, but there was no internet. So when the internet blossomed, you really became a tech expert.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, but I knew the technology. I knew the text search technology, which is primitive compared to today. But I studied and understood how you can go beyond, basic keyword search and have feedback and this machine learning. And then I combined that with desktop publishing so that you could then deliver this beautiful newspaper that was tailored to you, Carl's News, as opposed to this mass-produced media that people had to wade through. But yeah, but anyway, the point is that I was pushed out of the company and it was very traumatic. And I started to go deep and ask myself these deep existential questions. Why was I so identified with the business to the point where I drove myself burned out? And was this awakening experience real or delusion? And that ultimately changed the direction of my life, which is what led me to go back and get a PhD in psychology and transpersonal psychology, which is this field that combines spirituality and traditional psychology, because I wanted to understand myself. And, as they say, know thyself is kind of the essence of our quest, and to know ourselves in our essence. So that's kind of what led me on this path of introspection and understanding. And that's when I heard the term spiritual intelligence. I knew about emotional intelligence. The term spiritual intelligence was coined by this woman, Dana Zohar, but there was no operational definition of what it is and how to measure it. And I wanted to see how it related to leadership and a whole bunch of other positive outcomes, like all the research that has been done on emotional intelligence. So I set on a path to define it, academically research it, and find a way to measure it so we could study it. So it involved interviewing 71 teachers across all the world's traditions, from Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Taoism, earth-based, shamanism, and so on. And to my delight, I discovered that regardless of the theology, whether you believe in a deity called God or Buddha nature, or Muhammad was the final prophet, or Jesus was the Son of God and the Messiah, whatever theology each tradition has, they all share the same common virtues that say, and qualities that they cultivated, which is purpose and service and trust and gratitude and humility and integrity and compassion and so on. So that was delightful to find that these qualities are universal, and we don't have to fight about which theology. We can all cultivate these qualities, which lead to better life. And now you have the field of positive psychology that has developed this character strength inventory, Marty Seligman, values in action, and they have 24 qualities, and over half of those map directly into the 22 qualities in my model of spiritual intelligence. So
Yeah.
there's a convergence of ancient wisdom for thousands of years of spiritual traditions and modern science in the field of positive psychology and also leadership development. Now, all the research on leadership says that leaders that are effective have integrity, they're compassionate, they're good listeners, they're humble. It's not about their egos. So you have positive psychology, you have leadership development, you have ancient traditions, and all of that's coming together. And then I developed this model and measure of spiritual intelligence that showed that leaders that have higher spiritual intelligence lead teams with a higher morale, more commitment, lower turnover, even after you control for emotional intelligence. So spiritual intelligence is complementary to emotional intelligence, but they have a multiplicative effect. And so that's kind of what led me today, and the work that I'm doing now, to help leaders awaken spiritual intelligence in themselves and then through them in their entire organizations, because it has a huge ripple effect on everybody.
Well, everything you're talking about is interesting, especially that you mentioned positive psychology. I've studied some of that, and it's only really what the last 20, 25 years that positive psychology really came to the forefront. I've read Dr. Martin Seligman's book Flourish, and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi from Claremont University. Now he's passed, but he wrote Flow.
Uh-huh.
Which is a highly influential book. And it's been beautiful to see that. So, really, what you're talking about here is this evolution and awakening of the field of psychology integrating with spirituality. And wow, is that beautiful to finally see? And you're at the forefront of this too.
Yeah. And the point is that these are the higher potential of these are the higher potentials of humanity that we're awakening to. So psychology historically, was like looking at your history and your traumas and your neurosis, trying to help deal with the disease model. And that's important. I'm not saying, if you're sick, you need to go to the doctor. If your arm is broken, you need to put in a cast and heal. But you want medicine to not just be about healing the sick, but how to optimize your health so you're not sick in the first place. And, so positive psychology says if you cultivate these virtues, and spirituality says if you cultivate these qualities, you are going to be more healthy. And healthy and whole and holy all share the same root. And you mentioned flow and Csikszentmihalyi. So, if you look closely, what happens in the state of flow, we get so absorbed into what we're doing, whether it's skiing or playing tennis or watching a movie or doing a task that challenges us a little bit, but it's not overwhelming. And when we're so absorbed, our sense of self dissolves. There is no self, right? So it actually, a flow experience is a roundabout way of going into no self or a non-dual experience where you merge with your activity, and that's the most rewarding thing. So we think like the best thing is like there's me and the world, and I want to accumulate money and wealth and this and that, and I want to be happy and I want to accomplish. But we're most happy when we're doing something we're completely devoted to, and our sense of self dissolves into it, and there's no separation. And and that comes out of the flow experience. So flow experiences and non-dual experiences are essentially share that element.
Well, and as a longtime Course in Miracles student, boy, when you talk about non-dual experience, that's what it's all about. But you also mentioned all those different faiths and religions and spiritual studies that you looked at. One of the common denominators, if not the, is a sense of unity of all that is, and that's really what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's at the core, is that we are part of oneness, the tricky thing is that we're part of oneness, but we're not the same. I mean, as the as I think that the song goes, we're one, but we're not the same. I think it's a U2 song, and but when you think about it, and you look at our body, our biology, right? So in our body, there's trillions of cells, and each cell is distinct, has a distinct entity boundary. It has a cell membrane, and it has to take care of itself with the immune system and all of that. But it's part of an organ, right? And that organ has a unique function, whether it's in the kidney or in the lungs or in the spleen or whatever it is. And it's part of the organism. So each cell is distinct, is unique, but it all comes from the same DNA, from the same stem cells. And can't be selfish and say, well, I'm the lungs, I'm just going to keep all the oxygen for myself, I'm going to be the best. Or I'm the heart, I'm going to keep all the good blood for myself. Well, that may feel good for 1 second in the heart. I mean, but after a while, the rest of the body is not going to get the oxygen, it's not going to, and then everything's going to die. So we only thrive we have to take care of ourselves, but we also have to, do our unique contribution and role. So even though we all come from the same oneness, from the same stem cell, from the same DNA, we're all made in the image and likeness of the divine, if you want to use that language, but we're all distinct expressions of that, and we each have our unique contribution to make to the overall organism, to the one life, to the one existence we're all part of. So I love to quote this sage Hillel that said, if I'm not for myself, who is? But if I'm not only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? So we are both, this is kind of the confusing part is we're both individuals. We exist as both individuals. You can think about it in terms of modern physics. We're both particles and we're also waves. So, there's that particle wave duality in quantum physics. So we're both individuals and we're both one with everything. And we have to hold that paradox. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to find our calling, but in service of the greater whole. And that's the most fulfilling. When I bring my unique gifts and make my contribution, that's the most fulfilling because my life then has meaning, has purpose. I'm in service. And then I'm in a flow experience. And then, reality supports me because that's what life gave me these gifts for. It's like life wants you to express your unique gifts in service of life.
And you nailed it with that word paradox because everything you're talking about is a paradox where we're one, but we're individuals. And in that paradox, in the grand scheme of things, that this 3D life in the body is a dream of separation from the unity of all that is. And that's the paradox of being a human. But if you can grab a hold of it and be comfortable and peaceful about it and take your individual life purpose to, like you have, in order to make the world and your brothers and sisters' lives a much better place. So you can live in that paradox, but you can also be flourishing and happy and help the world.
Yeah, but it looks like we're separate, and this is a sort of like our Copernican revolution or Galileo moment of consciousness. So up until Copernicus and Galileo, when you look at the sky, it looks like the Earth is at the center and the sun is going around. That's how it looks, through the day. But then we understand reality and we say, no, 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 no. Really, the sun is at the center and the Earth is just rotating on its axis and going around the sun. And this is just an optical illusion. So I'm looking right now. It looks like I have a pot or a plant here on my desk, and there's trees outside. It looks they're separate. But reality is, every inhale I'm taking, like now, I'm inhaling the oxygen, which is the exhale of the plant and the tree. And then I'm exhaling the carbon dioxide and it's their inhale. So even though it's looking like optically like we're separate, really we're interconnected. We're part of this one life, one web of life. And this is our Copernican revolution awakening moment to understand that interconnectedness. And it's kind of like, but once we understand it, then the separation is illusion. There's no separation even at the physical level. Right now I'm connected to the earth through the force of gravity. I'm connected to the sun through gravity. I'm connected to the plant through this exchange of oxygen and CO2 and so on. And I'm connected to you right now through these grids of light. Now, when you think about it, what is happening? How are we, it's all electromagnetic radiation that's moving over fiber optics networks of the internet, which is really nothing more or less than grids of light. And I'm seeing you through light and light that's emitting from the screen here. So it looks separate, but that's what our mind is telling us because we're conditioned to think that way. But when you unpack it, you realize it is actually all interconnected and it's all made of light and energy. This is the physics of it, right? I mean, I could talk some more about the physics of it, but if you go into the Big Bang Theory even, everything was condensed energy and it was so hot it had to cool down before the first elementary particles could condense to helium. That's the first thing that could form. And all it is, as Einstein tells us, is E equals mc squared. So mass and matter, our body is really stardust. The earth is stardust, which is nothing less than condensed light, energy and light that congealed into what we call matter.
I would like to go back for one more moment. When you were laying on that massage table and had that, we're in the midst of a dark night of the soul, what do you think at that moment what triggered you to go off into this quote spiritual or kundalini awakening? Was it the massage therapist hitting meridian points, or you were just ready for it?
I think it's more I was ready for it. I don't know. Maybe they were hitting meridian points. I'm not aware of that. But I was very interested in the mind-body problem. I was reading about the relationship between consciousness and matter and so on. And then as I was focusing on the sensations in the body, I realized that there was we normally think that there's a me. And then there's the experience, there's the subject object duality, right? And but when you go into it, like there's only the experience, which is made of consciousness. And then I realized, like, oh, everything what I'm experiencing is made of awareness. My body is just awareness. The idea that there's something separate called matter, which is different than consciousness, different than spirit, is just an idea. But experientially there is no that. And then as my body and my mind were relaxing and opening, it just kind of dawned on me. And I can't explain it. I mean, these things in a way are a moment of grace. I mean, why did it happen? Why did Eckhart Tolle have his awakening experience lying on a park bench? It's some of those moments of grace that we have. I mean, we have to be ready, we have to be open to the possibility. But I don't think I can say, well, this is the algorithm. You want to get enlightened, A, B, and C. We do the work, we open ourselves, we read these things, we do these practices, whether it's meditation or prayer or whatever it is that opens us up, and then grace happens. I mean, that's my best explanation.
The state of grace. I'm sure Dr. David Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force and created the map of consciousness and kinesiology, strength testing. When he was a paper boy, when he was a young man, he had an accident where he almost died, and then he fell in a state of now and grace for a long period of time, and he said he could hardly relate to anything around him, but he still was in the body. So yes, it does happen to people, to you. It could happen to me, and just amazing stuff. But let's continue here. I would like to find out. You're an expert in spiritual intelligence. How does spiritual intelligence differ from simply being spiritual?
Well, you have to define what it means. So, by analogy, let's say, how is being emotional being different than being emotionally intelligent? If I said, do you know people in your life who are emotional? And you might think, oh, and those might be some people that tear up in watching a puppy commercial, etc. Well, that's not necessarily what emotional intelligence is. Emotional intelligence is the ability to use emotional information to help, regulate yourself and others and interact in more skillful ways and so on. So what is spiritual? I mean, you can have a spiritual belief system. You can believe in God, you can believe in oneness, you can believe in reincarnation, you can believe in angels. I don't know. You can have all kinds of beliefs. So those are spiritual beliefs. And I'm not knocking them down, but that those are beliefs. And then you can have a spiritual experience. You could be praying and you could feel connected to some higher power. You could be meditating. You can have your ego dissolved. I could be on the massage table and I have a Kundalini awakening and a dissolving of my ego. But the paradox is when I got out of that massage table, I wasn't acting necessarily in a very spiritually intelligent way because I wasn't honoring my teammates. I wasn't being a good listener. I wasn't grounded. I wasn't connecting with them. I was caught up in this grand vision of oneness, which, so I had an experience, but it didn't translate into spiritual intelligence. So spiritual intelligence is then how do I take that insight of our interconnectedness or whatever it might be and root myself in it such that these qualities that I'm talking about are embodied in my daily life. When I'm driving on the freeway, I don't forget the fact that we're connected just because we're all sitting in these metal boxes competing to get onto the freeway or off the ramp, or in the supermarket I'm behind somebody who's moving slow and I'm getting impatient because I have my agenda. Okay, so spiritual intelligence is like, how do I bring these qualities into daily life? Now, if I have a spiritual belief system or spiritual experiences, all of that is important. It can help inform me, but I have to practice and build these muscles, so to speak, and habits to bring compassion, to live a life of purpose, to be a humble human being. That's a lifelong journey for embodying these qualities. It's not just being spiritual. I could be spiritual. I meditate, I pray, etc. But then I go to church on Sunday, but how do I embody these qualities in daily life?
Well, you do a lot of one-on-one coaching with CEOs of companies, and I guess you probably answered this right now. I was going to ask, you're working with these CEOs. Well, uh, how does spiritual intelligent leadership help those people who work for those CEOs in the 9 to 5 daily jobs? So I guess you just kind of answered that, really.
Well, I mean, it helps them because when the CEO is coming from an inspired place of purpose and service, where they line up their purpose with the purpose of the organization, and they have a vision of how this or why this organization, whether it's a CEO or a whole company, but it could be at the team level. It could be a team of mechanics at an airline, and the team leader is like, okay, this is my vision of how we're going to do better service. Or it could be, a person at a restaurant, and they have a vision like, okay, we're here to serve, and this is how we add value to the world, and this is my vision. And then the people that resonate with that vision are called to join, and then they form a community with a shared intention, with a shared purpose, with a shared mission. So now they are part of a community of people that is aligned around a set of principles and values. So one of the biggest issues we have to deal with in our current culture and society is this loneliness epidemic, and we're all working remotely and so on. And we spend the bulk of our waking hours in the context of our work. So having a group of people that are aligned without a lot of toxic politics, where it's not about egos, but we're here to serve and we're here to realize this vision and mission, it creates a sense of fulfillment and connection and belonging for everybody that's in there. And then there's mutuality of care, people compassionate towards each other, people are present with each other, people are open to each other. It's less about ego, it's less about who's right, it's more about doing what is right. Now, rather than I am right and you're wrong, no, let's do what is right. And that's a lot more fulfilling to be part of that. And then people are present with each other, respectful with each other, and then they go home and they're fulfilled, and they bring those practices of being present and mindful into their families, and it just ripples out.
I wish entertainment and media would present people like you. I don't have a TV and I don't watch it, but I know what's on it. You see how many murders a day on television and craziness and wars on TV, and that's always presented at the forefront. But we could definitely use information like you, and that's why we're doing this podcast, so we can present this to the world. And thank you for it, Yosi. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Carl. Thank you. Yeah, and this is part of the predicament we have as neuroscientists say the human brain has a negativity bias. So the reason the media emphasizes all this negative news and disasters is that, it tends to get people's attention. And that helped us in the jungle survive, that we kind of pay attention to threats, etc. But we have to spend a concentrated effort to practice gratitude and count our blessings, to rewire ourselves to offset this negativity bias that our brains have, which puts us in a chronic stress. And that's why you have a skyrocketing level of emotional psychological problems of depression, anxiety, addictions, suicide rates. So we have to count our blessings. We have to focus on the positive, and it goes back to the positive psychology. And one of the core practices is gratitude practice. And you have to spend 20, 30 seconds in a good state to really reverse the impact of the cortisol and adrenaline that's constantly running in our system. And part of the problem is, this thing about, I mentioned the loneliness and disconnection, and living in a scary world where we're competing with each other in a dog-eat-dog world, is that puts our body in a fight or flight mode, and with cortisol and adrenaline, and it hurts our psychological well-being and our emotional physiological well-being. But all of this is like, what is the worst prison punishment? Is solitary confinement, right? People go crazy because we're wired as social animals to be connected to other people and life in general, and the transcendent dimension or the divine, however whether you want to call it. But if we believe that we are all separate skin encapsulated ego, effectively we're putting ourselves in solitary confinement. And there's this connection, and we're in fight or flight mode, and we're burning our nervous system. And so we have to reverse that through these gratitude practices and understanding our interconnectedness, so we understand our connection to the transcendent dimension of existence, the sacred dimension, the web of life we're part of.
What you just said made me think for a moment. You're talking about loneliness and solitary confinement. Uh, do you think that the pandemic that happened in 2020 and carried on for a couple years, where so many people were isolated, for maybe the first time in their life, and felt like they were in solitary confinement? I may be wrong on this, but it seems like much of the world grabbed a hold of that, quote, solitary confinement, and grew from it and became more aware there's got to be more than this. They had time finally to let all the chaos and cacophony in their ears and their eyes sit there and consider these things.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ironic, paradoxical thing, that you have a tragic thing like that happen, and all the people died, and all the suffering. But sometimes that's what it takes to wake us up, to understand that no, we need human connections, and we also understand in our connectedness, because a virus that who knows where it started, in some lab or someplace in China, affected all of humanity. So that kind of shattered this idea that we can, have these boundaries and contain things. No, it really highlighted our interconnectedness across national geographic boundaries. So at multiple levels, that tragic, painful experience that humanity went through has some of these positive consequences. And, it goes to this thing about, like I said, well, why now more people are ready for awakening and enlightenment? Because we're realizing some of these things, and we're hit this critical mass. We understand that human intelligence, our IQ, has done amazing things for humanity. It's landed us on the moon. We've split the atom. We've decoded the genome. We're now building AI that rivals our own intelligence, including my own. And we have emotional intelligence, and we're learning to be aware of our emotions and be more empathic. But yet we have these global problems, environmental degradation, these psychological, emotional problems, loneliness, anxiety, depression, and so on. We have wars, political polarization. So something's missing. We have this IQ, we've developed it, we've done all these amazing things for humanity, we've got emotional intelligence, but yet it seems like there's a lot of problems. So I think the need for spiritual intelligence, understanding our interconnectedness, understanding our oneness, we are part of this one web of life. We're a cell in this bigger organ, which is our community, our tribe, and then which is embedded in this bigger organism of life on Earth, and so on. And we're forced to see that because the traditional way we've gone about it is not going to get us out of this mess that in a way we're in. But it's also a beautiful opportunity. So I don't know, it's an exciting time to be alive. Maybe humanity is going to finally wake up and
Here.
yeah, and more people are interested in spirituality and understanding that just chasing more material goods and comfort is not the answer.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to go back just from my own understanding again, how spiritual intelligence and emotional intelligence interplay with each other. I'm not sure I understand exactly what emotional intelligence is, if you wouldn't mind rehashing that a little bit.
Sure. So emotional intelligence was a concept that was put forth by two academicians originally, Salovey and Meyer. I think one of them was at Yale, and the other one is the University of New Hampshire, and they published a paper in 1990 called Emotional Intelligence, and what they defined it is the ability to be aware of and regulate one's own and others' emotions. So what is emotional intelligence? Essentially is I know when I'm sad, I know when I'm angry, I know when I'm happy, I know when whatever. I'm aware of that and I can regulate it. In other words, when I'm angry, I am not going to throw a shoe at you or at somebody. I'm not going to curse and punch and yell and whatever. Yeah, I'm aware of my anger. It doesn't mean I don't get angry, but at least I can manage it. So that's emotional intelligence. And so it's awareness and regulation of emotion in self and others. So I can be aware of my emotions, but I can also be aware of your emotions. I can watch your facial expression, your body language, your tone of voice, and I know, oh, Carl is really excited right now. Or no, Carl right now is really engaged and concentrated. He's very interested and engaged with me. So, and I can feel that, right? So that's part of emotional intelligence. I'm seeing you, I'm seeing the expression in your face, your body language, and I know. And now part of emotional intelligence, I know how to influence your emotions too. And so I'm empathic with you, I'm connected with you at the emotional level. So that's emotional intelligence. Beautiful stuff, super important. Okay, and then that got popularized by Daniel Goleman in his book, Emotional Intelligence, and then multiple academicians developed measures of emotional intelligence and showed that people who score higher on emotional intelligence are better leaders, they're happier, and have better relationships, and so on. So there's a whole body of research that is taking the concept of emotional intelligence from 1990. Up until 1990, most people thought there was a dichotomy. You're either emotional or you're reasonable. People that were emotional were kind of out of control. But then emotional intelligence came and said, no, 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 no. You can be emotional and intelligent and reasonable, and that it's not a dichotomy. Okay, so that's emotional intelligence. Now, what is spiritual intelligence? So emotional intelligence is the awareness, regulation, the ability to draw on emotional information and resources By analogy, spiritual intelligence is being aware of and being able to draw on and embody spiritual qualities. So, what are those spiritual qualities? So, those would be things like gratitude and humility and trust and purpose and service and so on, which are these spiritual qualities that have been hailed, forgiveness and so on, that have been hailed by all the traditions, and then the ability to embody them. So those are two different things, but there is some overlap. And in my study and research, there's some small to moderate correlation. And let me explain why that actually makes sense. So we said emotional intelligence is the ability to be aware of one's emotions, right? And then spiritual intelligence is the ability to know oneself at the deepest level. So, spiritual intelligence involves self-knowledge, self-awareness, but not just at the emotional level. It's the ability to connect and know one's essence and one's spirit. So it involves awareness of one's emotions, but it goes much deeper. And it's not just emotions. With spiritual intelligence, you study your dreams, you have intuition, so you have deeper awareness, you have awareness of your higher self. So the awareness and the self-knowledge goes deeper than the emotional level. The other thing I said about emotional intelligence is there's self-regulation. So if I'm angry, I don't throw shoes or plates at someone. I don't curse and yell. Okay, that's self-regulation. With spiritual intelligence, deeper, there's inner peace and equanimity, which means I am angry, but even though I'm angry at the surface, in my core, in my depth, I have peace. So it's like, I'm rooted at the depth of the ocean. I'm anchored there. On the surface, there are these waves and storms. But when you look under the surface in the ocean, even when it's super wavy up there, like I'm angry, I am actually rooting myself in the depth of the ocean near the ground, and there's gentle movements down there, and I'm in peace, I'm in equanimity. So again, it's deeper than self-regulation. It's deeper than I just don't, yell and curse and throw plates at someone or punch them. I notice my anger. It doesn't mean that I'm spiritually intelligent. I never get angry. No, anger sometimes is reasonable. It gives me information. I need to act. It mobilizes. There's righteous anger. My boundaries are violated. There's a reason why God or nature gave us anger. But we know we don't get overly disturbed, and we're skillful. While I'm also angry, I'm rooted, there's inner peace, and I have access to my higher self and my integrity and morality and conscience, so I can act in a kind way, even if it's fierce. And I set a boundary. So I hope I'm making sense about how these things relate, but also different.
So if I am able to embody spiritual intelligence and embody emotional intelligence in a beautiful balance, then that will help me to recognize and remember my divine higher self and my life purpose. And if people can do that, then I would believe that if we each pursued our life purpose, which we discover at some point in our life, the world would be a much better place, not only my own life, but those around me.
For sure, for sure. And I'd be connected and I'd be kind. And I would, be compassionate, but I'll have the yin and the yang, to use that language. I can be compassionate, I can be kind, but at times I can also be fierce and very purposeful and very goal directed. So, so yeah, I mean, I know my purpose, but I understand my interconnectedness. I'm kind to you. I listen to you. I empathize with you. But at times I can also be fierce and say no and put a boundary, and which protects you and me, protects you from doing violence, or protects someone else from doing something that does ultimately damage to their soul. Because when we harm another human being, at some level in our soul, in our karma, however way you want to think about it, that does damage to us. So we're actually serving the other person and serving ourselves by setting healthy boundaries to stop them from doing that violence.
You know, your research and your writing remind me very much of a unique and successful author and researcher, Stephen Covey, the author of The Seven Habits of the Highly Successful People. Has
Uh-huh.
anyone ever pointed that out, this similarity between you two?
Well, I mean, certainly he's been somebody whose work have admired, and he mentioned spiritual intelligence as being kind of the root intelligence that in his book, The Eighth Habit, he
Yes.
talks about saying. But yeah, a lot of the qualities, the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I mean, it's a classic. You know, it's sold tens of millions, and some of the qualities he's talking about overlap. And you know, he was ultimately rooted in spiritual, you know, and he talked about trust. His son wrote a book about the speed of trust,
I have
and
that book too.
yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of synergy between what he did, but I mean, he was a giant, you know, and he's influenced a lot. I don't know what academic research exactly he did, but I mean, he was certainly a prolific author and a thought leader.
Well, what
So.
about your book, Spiritually Intelligent Leadership? Did the writing about that come about because it was a culmination of all your research and teaching?
Yeah, and my client cases, you know, I mean, I work with clients and I wanted to, I mean, you know, we talked about people's purpose and I feel that my purpose when, as I said, we live life forward, but we look back and it makes sense in hindsight. So, you know, when I think about all the unique journey I've been on, which is this leadership in the military and in leading companies and coaching, and then psychology and then spiritual intelligence, was like, how are all these things coming together? And what do I want to offer to the world? What's my calling? And my calling is this thing of helping awaken spiritual intelligence. And a big impactful path for doing that is working through leaders, because when the leaders uh, awaken to greater spiritual intelligence, they have greater impact on their organizations and so on. So it all made sense that all these things kind of converged, that I want to take this research and my experience working with clients and show that this is practical. This isn't, you know, just woo-woo. And my research shows that it's practical, that leaders with higher spiritual intelligence are more effective, lead teams with greater morale, greater commitment, and so on. And follow-on research that used my measure of spiritual intelligence showed that leaders that are more spiritual intelligence produce better financial results for their organization. There was another study that was done with banks, and banks where the average level of spiritual intelligence among their employees was higher produced better return on assets compared to others. So, you know, again, like I said, with emotional intelligence, there was a dichotomy between being emotional and being reasonable. In our culture, there's a dichotomy between being spiritual and being practical. And most people think, oh, spiritual, it's woo-woo, you know, whatever, you're communicating with angels, you're I don't know what. Show me the money. How does this contribute to the bottom line? And my research and this growing field of research that now spans, you know, many researchers that have translated my measure to different languages is showing that this is super practical. People have more satisfying life, better quality of life, healthier lives, better relationship, more productivity individually, collectively, more effective leadership, you know, more resilience, all these things we want. So this is practical. This spiritual intelligence bridges the gap between the spiritual and the practical, and that's what I'm trying to promote in the world.
Well, it all begins with inspiration, right? After all, the Latin root of that word is spirit, right?
Yeah, which is the animating breath of life. So yeah. So and you know, leaders want to be inspiring. And that's what, you know, I remember one of my first business school classes at Harvard was managers and leaders. Are they the same and different? And you know, so managers is the formal authority position. You make decisions, you control resources, you etc. But leaders inspire. And as you pointed out, the root of inspire is spirit and the animating breath of life. So what leaders do is they breathe life and purpose and vision into their organizations, and they create harmony and coherence in those organizations. But that's different than being managers. And in a way, we're all leaders. We don't have to be working in a company as a manager with a formal role. We're leaders in our family, we're leaders in our community, we're influencing each other. One of the root definitions of what leadership is influence in groups, power and influence in groups. And how do I do that? By being inspired. And so I can't inspire anybody else until when I'm inspired. So first and foremost, leadership is an inside job. I have to lead myself. I have to get inspired. And only then can I influence, inspire, and lead others, even without trying.
Well, we are speaking with Yosi Amram. He is an amazing person, a teacher. What I would like to know, we're going to wind this up here, but I do want to find this out. You have, you're the founder of two nonprofits called TrueMasculinity.org and IngenderLove.org. How did you end up starting those?
It's through my own struggles with the issues of gender and what it means to be a man in the world, and all the stuff around toxic masculinity, and how can, and many of my clients that I see that struggle with, how do I embody my power as a man, and but do that in a non-violent way, because men have done, that we have such a history of violence through wars and rape and sexual things, and the whole Me Too movement that has brought that into highlight. And I think there's a crisis for a lot of boys. When you look at boys, their suicide rates, and they're dropping out of school. Used to be the boys had better attendance, they went to colleges, etc. But a lot of boys are lost, and they don't know how to have dignity about being a man. And so I think we're in desperate need to give boys a vision of what it means to be a healthy man. And it's not violence, but it's integrating the masculine and the feminine, which are energies that exist in all of us, whether we're male-bodied or female-bodied. And there's so much locomotion, and women are looking for advancing their careers and owning their power in business and elsewhere. So it's like, I think it just felt to me that this was an important conversation for both men and women. And then you've got all these people that are non-binary and gender fluid, and just like, what is gender? How do I think about gender? How do I think about my role? What is socially conditioned? What is biological? How do we free ourselves and liberate our potential to be the best that we can be? And I struggled with those questions. My clients struggle with those questions. So I created this conference, this event, and brought experts and panels and so on. It was a beautiful thing. We had 7,000 people register, over 1,000 people live at the event. And so I think it's a huge topic. But it goes into this topic of inner wholeness, which is one of the dimensions of spiritual intelligence and inner wholeness. And we talked about paradox and how to integrate the yin and the yang inside of us. And this is like, we have to integrate confidence and humility. People get confused. Like, oh, if I'm confident, my confidence is different than arrogant. I can be confident and humble. I can have my masculine strength, which knows how to be assert and initiate and set boundaries, and I can have my feminine qualities of how to be receptive and nurturing and kind and compassionate. And we need both. So, it's kind of like bringing that inner wholeness at these levels. But gender seemed to be an important topic that I struggled with, and my clients do, and I thought that was important.
Well, I will put those links in the show notes so everybody who is interested, they can go check it out. I will say, Yosi Amram, you are the prime example of service to others, and I really appreciate you being here in the world with us. And last thing, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and connect with you? What's your website?
Well, my website is yosiamram.net, like my name, YOSIAMRAM.net. You mentioned my book, Spiritually Intelligent Leadership. You can find it online, all the usual places. And then I have a YouTube channel at Awakening Spiritual Intelligence, all one word. And there are recordings of free events and classes that I have, short videos for quick practices to cultivate these qualities. So, yeah, I mean, those are just some ways. And thank you so much for the opportunity and the honor. And as I said, we're in this together, and we need all of us to come together to help understand our interconnectedness and awaken this greater level of spiritual intelligence, because we have a shared destiny. And we're all cells in this one organism, one web of life, this divine wholeness that we are part of. And the sooner we recognize that, the sooner we remember that we are part of that. And the word remember is remember. Then we become members in that chain of being, that chain of life. And that takes us out of that solitary confinement and gives our life connection and meaning. And we feel inspired and connected and empowered. And that's what we all want to do. And we all want to live in a world where other people around us are inspired, connected, and empowered. That makes it fun.
Oh man, Yosi, beautiful, beautiful words. You couldn't have said it any better. And we appreciate you. We are blessed to have had you here on World Awakenings. And I know people are enjoying this beautifully. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Carl. What a delight.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.